In 1966, in Houston, NASA built a steel chamber big enough to swallow a rocket. Then it sucked nearly every atom of air from it. Inside, a human was the last pressurized object. In here, one tiny hardware slip means instant disaster, the kind that can actually boil your blood. This is the story of the deadliest environment NASA ever made, and the split-second mistake that revealed just how close the space race came to killing one of its own. How does a chamber meant to prepare astronauts almost destroy one of its own? And what really happens when a person collides with deep space physics and loses? A steel vault, the size of a small house, sits hidden behind triple-sealed doors, built not to keep something in, but to keep the universe out. NASA's high vacuum chamber at the Manned Spacecraft Center was not just a test rig, it was a machine for making deep space on Earth. Inside, the air is sucked away until the pressure drops to nearly zero, lower than the surface of Mars, lower than the top of Everest. The numbers are brutal. Less than 0.1 pounds per square inch, 100,000 times thinner than the air you're breathing right now. Oxygen, nitrogen, every molecule that keeps a person alive, gone in minutes. This chamber was designed for one purpose: to find out if humans in their suits could survive where nothing else could. Every inch of the walls, every hatch, every bolt had to hold back a pressure difference so extreme a single leak could turn the whole place into a death trap. Engineers called it a triple door system, 3 heavy steel barriers, each with its own locking sequence, each tested for leaks so small they would take 1,000 years to fill a soda can. Inside, the only thing keeping a human alive is a suit pumped up to 3.8 pounds per square inch, barely enough to keep blood from boiling. No test dummy could tell NASA what a real body would feel. That's why, in 1966, they sent living men into the void, trusting that the chamber's emergency systems, like manual slam valves, nitrogen flood lines, and pressure gauges, would work if something snapped. But when the vacuum is that total, and the only thing between life and death is a few hoses and seals, the line between a training run and a catastrophe is razor thin. Jim LeBlanc was no astronaut, but he was the one NASA trusted to step into the void. On December 14, 1966, he climbed into the chamber, zipped into a prototype suit, and hooked up to a thick, steel-braided hose, the only thing feeding him air. The test was routine. The chamber was already near vacuum. Then, with a simple shift of his weight, something went wrong. The quick disconnect coupling on his chest, the supposedly foolproof latch, snapped loose with a pop louder than a gunshot. That hose, his lifeline, dropped away. Instantly, the suit's pressure gauge plummeted. What was meant to hold back the universe now became a death trap. LeBlanc felt it before he could think. The suit collapsed against his skin, the gentle push of air gone. No hiss, no warning, just the sudden, crushing silence of nothingness. In less than 10 seconds, the pressure inside his suit plunged from 3.8 pounds per square inch to almost zero. There was no time to react, no time to call for help. The chamber's walls were thick as bank vaults, and on the other side, engineers stared in disbelief as LeBlanc stumbled backwards, arms flailing, the hose dangling uselessly. The quick disconnect, designed for speed, not absolute security, had failed under a simple, everyday movement. A mundane piece of hardware, a single overlooked latch, had turned the most advanced life support system on Earth into a coffin. In that moment, the boundary between survival and disaster was nothing but a cheap metal fitting and a few seconds of luck. Vacuum doesn't wait. The second the hose snapped free, the universe tried to claw its way inside. There is no wind, no warning, just a pressure gap so brutal it's like every molecule in the room wants to explode out through the suit. The technician's body became the last pressurized thing in a steel tomb, and the vacuum outside was relentless. Air inside the suit did not leak out. It was yanked out, ripped through every seam and pore. The pressure inside dropped from 3.8 pounds per square inch to almost nothing in under 10 seconds. That was not a slow leak. That was the air in your lungs, your ears, your sinuses, all trying to escape at once. The suit, built to hold a thin bubble against the void, collapsed flat, squeezing skin and muscle. The lungs, now the only pockets of pressure left, faced a force trying to tear them inside out. If you try to hold your breath, your chest can burst like a balloon. If you exhale, the last scraps of oxygen vanish in a heartbeat. There is nothing gentle about it. The vacuum does not care if you are trained, careful, or lucky. It attacks every weak point, searching for a way in. With the suit empty, the only thing holding out was flesh and blood. The vacuum hammered at every cell, every vessel, trying to turn the technician's body into just another empty shell. In that moment, the body became the final pressure vessel, alone against the void. The countdown to blackout had already started. The human body has a brutal deadline in vacuum, 14 seconds. That is not a myth or a guess. That is the hard limit before the brain shuts down, starved of oxygen. The moment the suit lost pressure, every breath LeBlanc had was already running out. There is no way to cheat it. You can't hold your breath. The difference in pressure would tear your lungs like tissue paper. Exhaling only buys you a few heartbeats before the last scraps of oxygen in your blood get burned up. Inside the body, things go from bad to catastrophic in a flash. Blood is not boiling in the Hollywood sense, but the water in saliva and tissues starts to vaporize. LeBlanc felt bubbles fizzing on his tongue, the first sign that the air around him had dropped below the boiling point of water. That is not just a weird sensation, it is a red alert warning that the oxygen fueling his brain is about to vanish. The science is cold. At body temperature, water turns to vapor at pressures below 0.07 pounds per square inch. In that chamber, the pressure had already crashed way past that line. The countdown was on. 14 seconds. That is the window. After that, the lights go out, and the body becomes nothing but a limp, airless shell. Every second counts, and the clock is merciless. The moment the vacuum hit, LeBlanc's mouth turned into a science experiment gone wrong. At normal pressure, saliva just sits on your tongue. But in that chamber, with pressure crashing past 0.07 pounds per square inch, the vapor point for water at body temperature, his spit did not just dry up. It started to boil, not from heat, but from the sheer lack of air pressing down. The technical term is ebulism, but LeBlanc did not need a dictionary. He felt bubbles fizzing and popping across his tongue. A sensation so alien and wrong, it cut through the panic like a red flare. He later said that he could feel the saliva on his tongue starting to bubble just before he went unconscious. This is what happens when your body's fluids face the raw physics of space. The air pressure that normally keeps everything liquid is gone. Saliva, tears, the wet lining of your throat. Suddenly, they are all under less pressure than a can of soda opened on Mount Everest. Bubbles erupt where they should not. It is not just uncomfortable. It is the first sign that your body is losing the battle. The boiling is not Hollywood drama. It is simple, brutal math. At 37 degrees Celsius, water turns to vapor below 0.07 pounds per square inch. LeBlanc's chamber had already plunged past that threshold. Inside his mouth, the universe was trying to tear him apart, one molecule at a time, and with every second, the risk spread deeper, toward blood and tissues, as the vacuum kept clawing for new territory. The body doesn't just give up when the air is gone. It fights back, but the laws of physics always win. With the suit collapsed and the lungs emptied, the real horror kicks in. Every drop of blood, every cell, carries gases that are suddenly desperate to escape. Inside LeBlanc, dissolved oxygen and nitrogen burst out of solution, forming microbubbles that race through veins and tissues. The effect isn't Hollywood blood boiling, but something stranger, a human ballooning from the inside out. Skin stretches, fingers puff up, Cheeks swell, not because of heat, but because the vacuum outside is pulling the gases in his blood apart faster than his body can hold them in. Picture a can of soda. Shake it up, then pop the tab at the top of Everest. That hiss, that violent rush of bubbles, is what's happening inside LeBlanc's veins. The pressure outside is so low that the gases in his blood expand instantly, forcing tissue to swell. It's not just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. If the bubbles get big enough, they can block circulation, starving organs of oxygen. This isn't some rare effect, it's basic physics. At near zero pressure, the body's fluids go from liquid to vapor in seconds. That's why, in those final heartbeats before blackout, LeBlanc's body began to swell. He became his own pressure vessel, a fragile balloon in a steel tomb. The swelling is a warning, the clock is almost out, and blackout is only a breath away. LeBlanc's last conscious seconds were a blur of panic and instinct. His arms shot out, desperate to grab the hose, but the world was already spinning sideways. The pressure in his head built to a crushing roar, his vision narrowed, and every muscle felt like it was moving through wet cement. He tried to shout, to signal, but the air wouldn't come, just a silent gasp swallowed by the void. The fizzing on his tongue turned to numbness, then nothing at all. Legs buckled, knees hit the steel floor. His hands scraped for grip, but found only the cold, unyielding metal of the chamber. The suit, once a second skin, now clung like shrink wrap, squeezing out the last dregs of movement. In the control room, engineers watched as LeBlanc's body slumped, limbless and limp, collapsing in a heap. For a heartbeat, he was still. Then gravity took over, and he toppled sideways, unconscious before he hit the ground. Inside that sealed tomb, LeBlanc's body was now just dead weight in a dead silence, the fight over before anyone could reach him. In the control room, every second hammered like a warning bell. The standard protocol was clear. If the chamber lost pressure, the emergency valve stayed locked until the safety officer gave the all clear. The normal repressurization cycle dragged on for over half an hour, slow, careful, safe. But as LeBlanc's body hit the floor, nobody cared about the manual. Cliff Hess, the chamber operator, locked eyes with the safety officer. On paper, they were supposed to wait for confirmation, double-check every step, keep the chamber from thermal shock or stray nitrogen flooding the room. But when the technician's suit went flat and the monitors screamed zero, rules became a luxury. The safety officer didn't hesitate. One order: override the system. The emergency valve was slammed shut by hand, bypassing every safeguard. Nitrogen roared into the chamber. The pressure outside LeBlanc's body shot upward, fighting to crush the vacuum before it could finish the job. Engineers risked blowing out the suit or rupturing the chamber itself, but the alternative was watching a man die behind 3 steel doors. The normal 30-minute cycle was tossed aside for an 87-second gamble. In those moments, the only thing that mattered was speed, not procedure. The rescue wasn't just a technical fix, it was a conscious decision to break protocol and bet everything on a slim chance at survival. The pressure inside the chamber didn't just rise, it slammed back like a freight train. In the control room, hands flew over switches, safety rules were tossed aside, and nitrogen howled through the pipes. The normal 30-minute slow bleed was out the window. This was a bare-knuckle fight with the clock. The numbers on the gauges shot upward, chasing the pressure curve as fast as steel and valves would allow. In just under a minute and a half, the chamber was back to breathable air. Not perfect, not gentle, just enough to drag a man back from the edge. When the doors finally cracked open, LeBlanc was flat on the floor, but alive. The flight surgeon was first through, checking vitals. Heart pounding, lungs working, no signs of the worst-case injuries. The only thing that stuck was a fierce earache, a reminder of the pressure that nearly tore him apart. No blood in the lungs, no lasting brain damage, just a body that had stared down the vacuum and somehow walked away. The rescue wasn't pretty. but it worked. The lesson was clear: speed saves lives. And sometimes, breaking the rules is the only way to cheat death in a steel box where the universe wants you dead. NASA did not just patch the hose and move on. After LeBlanc hit the floor, engineers tore into every inch of hardware and every line of procedure with the same urgency as a bomb squad. The quick disconnect that failed, a simple metal latch meant for speed, became a red flag. Within months, ECN 68A004 hit the books, mandating a secondary locking pin on every quick disconnect fitting used in the chamber. No more trusting a single snap. Now, every connection had to survive a tug, a twist, and a double check by a second technician before a test could even start. The days of a lone operator hooking up a suit were over. The new rule was 2 sets of eyes, 2 signatures, every time. If the lock did not click twice, nobody went into the chamber. Every hose, every clamp, every pin was now tracked and logged in a checklist that followed the technician from the prep room to vacuum. These were not just tweaks, they were hard-coded with engineering change numbers stamped onto the blueprints and test logs. The message was brutal and clear. One failure was enough. No one would ever face the void alone again, not on NASA's watch. The fallout from LeBlanc's brush with the void did not end when the chamber doors swung open. Inside NASA, the shockwaves ran deep. The incident hammered home a brutal truth: the universe does not care about blueprints or bravado. If a single hose or latch fails, the void wins. That lesson carved itself into the bones of the Apollo program. Within months, new rules hit the books. No more lone wolf shortcuts, no more trusting a single pair of hands or eyes. Training Manual. TM-2903 rolled out in July 1967, drilling every technician and astronaut on rapid vacuum decompression, human physiology under stress, and emergency rescue. The modules did not just teach procedures, they drilled the terror of those 14 seconds into muscle memory. Every test now required a double check, 2 signatures, and a backup plan for every hose, every clamp, every second spent in the chamber. NASA's Safety Directive. 13.4 locked in a new emergency vent protocol, and every future extravehicular activity procedure update pointed back to what happened in that steel vault. The culture changed, risk tolerance shrank. The story of a man's saliva boiling in his mouth became a warning that echoed through every checklist and every moonwalk. That is how a near-fatal accident in a hidden room shaped the legacy that caught Apollo's explorers on the edge of the unknown. Space doesn't kill you slowly. It tries to rip you apart in seconds. That's the monster LeBlanc met face to face, no spaceship or moonwalk required. Our technology gets better, but the vacuum never gets kinder. Every mission today still hangs on split-second margins. Ignore that, and the next headline won't be a near miss. Stay sharp out there. Drop your thoughts in the comments. How close is close enough for you?